Oh, we're live streamed. We're being live streamed, everyone. Yahoo! Thanks everyone for viewing. We're so excited to have you all here. We are waiting for Dr. James Small to join the call, and when he does, you guys are in for a treat. So thank you for joining us here today. I hope you guys all are ready for Juneteenth this Saturday, June 18th in Mullinex Park from 11 to 7. It's going to be an awesome and fun day full of celebration of our culture, where we are today and the work that we have to do forward. And so, yeah, we look forward to having each of you all there. Bring your families for a day of fun, celebration, remembrance, first and foremost, for our ancestors and the great loss that we endured, and the work that we have yet to do, and the work that we're currently doing. So we appreciate you guys following, we appreciate you guys joining, and of course we appreciate your continued support.
So y'all don't have anything else to add?
There he is. Hello, Dr. Small. How are you doing today?
I'm well, my dear. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Guru.
Guru.
Guru, Dr.
Yes.
Small.
Yes, sir. Hotep, Hotep. How are you doing, bro?
Doing fine, brother.
Good, good, good. So,
well, we're very thankful to have you on this call with us today. And we're really excited and thankful to have you with us on Saturday for this, for the upcoming Juneteenth Freedom Fest here in Frederick, Maryland. So yes, we're very thankful for you joining us, and we're looking forward to diving into some great questions that we have for you. So if you'd like to get started, we are ready for you.
well, tell me where I'm going. You have to open the door.
Okay. So for those of our listeners and of our followers and viewers who aren't familiar with your work, could you give us a sort of a summary of who you are, your background, where you're from?
Oh yeah, that's a whole lecture in itself. So. Well, first, I'm from the Carolinas, Georgetown, South Carolina. And like we say down there, Georgetown County. I grew up on a plantation in between Georgetown and Pawleys Island, between the Atlantic Ocean, the Waccamaw Pee River, one of the old rice plantations. Born in 1945, raised on the plantation, went to school there. I was honored to speak at my elementary school and junior high school teacher, because she was the same woman. She taught us from the first grade to the sixth grade in a one-room classroom with 6 different class represented. That's a genius, right? She lived to be 98 years old, and she went to the ancestors last July, and I was happy that the family asked, because she and I stayed like son and mother our entire lives. And when my mom died, I remember I went to her house and I was just all broken up, which I should have been. And she said, don't worry, I'll continue as your mama now, which she did, you know. Her name was Miss Betty Murray, most extraordinary African woman. I left Acadia Plant. Well, in Acadia, you know, in Georgetown, it's a very strong county. And if you go back to just after the Civil War, Rainey, the first brother to go to Congress, came from that town. You know, that town, Black members made up much of the resistance movement with Francis Marion back in the revolutionary days of America. And so I'm a small, and we have an extraordinary history in South Carolina. Our family, of course, was involved in the Civil War and involved before, involved in getting elected to Congress. one of our families, our great uncles, was beside Nova Drew Ali in the founding of the Morris Science Temple. And most of my grannies, grandpa and them, they were all members of Morris Science, as well as Prince Hall Masons. So I grew up in a Baptist church with Prince Hall Masons and Morris Scientists and Odd Fellows and Knights of Pythias and Eastern Stars. And we have forgotten the strength of that kind of community institutions. And we've allowed them to fall by the wayside. And I wish we would reconsider, meaning the young people. I went to Howard High School in Georgetown, got involved in the movement about age 14. But when you grew up there, you were in the movement all your life. But at age 14 is when I realized I'm doing something. Pickett and Woolworth, Pickett in the Strand Theater and the Palace Theater. By 18, we were running white supermarkets out of the Black community, you know. Met Malcolm X at 16, and my life was never the same after my mother took me to New York to meet him. Joined the Navy in high school as a reservist, got railroaded on active duty by the whites of the town the day I graduated. A very good friend of mine who happened to be white, Ray Roberts, beautiful young man, got me out of the Navy after 3 months so that I could assume a scholarship at Savannah State. That was my first school, Savannah State in Georgia. Couldn't stay there because when I went to join the Reserve Center, knock on the door, and all dressed in my white starch, you know, I'm going to a new place. In Georgetown, the Reserve Center had been integrated back in 1942, and they never segregated it. So I went to an integrated reserve facility. I thought that was true in the rest of the world. And when I reported for duty at Savannah, I was greeted with, "Nigga, what you doing here?" So, you know what came out of my mouth solidly, "Oh," you know, and they slammed the door in my face. I'm in full military uniform with orders from the President of the United States under my arms. And that's how I was greeted at a naval facility. I knocked again. This time, the people who opened the door were officers and the commander. And they invited me in and asked me, how did I get orders? They thought I was like some integrating thing. I go, like, I don't know nothing about that. I go to school down the road at Savannah State. I'm in the US Navy. You're the closest reserve center. I have orders to report to you. Of course, they spend the next couple of hours calling, I guess, all around the country trying to figure out what do we do with this Negro, and left me out in a hallway by myself for 2 hours. Nobody spoke to me. People peeked out at the door and looked at me. And that night I got jumped by some young white men. They weren't from the military. They were from this group that hung around this drive-in thing where they drank beer. But the people from, to their benefit, the Navy personnel came and rescued me. And when I came back the next month, the same thing was attempting to happen again, but I had military master at arms who walked me to the bus stop to go back to school. And somebody drove by and shot into the crowd. Well, that was the end of my career at Savannah State in Georgia. I was bitter, disappointed, and angry, but I know I had to leave town because in those days, if I didn't leave town, you would not be having probably this conversation. And so I left, joined the military. We were very active. There was a strong Black movement in the US military, Army, Navy, we were very organized. And one of our first things was demanded that we were going to wear natural hairdos. And we got fined $50 a month for our entire state, those of us who decided to do that, for wearing our hair that way. And we wanted certain things for Black people, so forth. To quiet me down, they made me the ship's librarian because I would be in the library by myself literally all day. Well, that was the worst thing they could have done to me because I went in there with them books and I fell in love with books and fell in love with history and fell in love with spirituality and religion. And when I submerged from there, Jane Small had been born, you know. But while my last few months in the Navy, Malcolm was assassinated. My brother, who was a member of his organization, sent me the clippings. I made a big portfolio and a picture album. And this is my first encounter with American intelligence. The CID, Central Intelligence Division of the US military, took my album with no explanation of just photographs of Malcolm's and Kennedy's assassination. I'm a kid, I'm like 19 years old, so I don't understand all of what that's about. As soon as I hit the ground in 1966, I go and find Malcolm X's sister, and I joined the OAAU. By February 1960, well, 2 months after that, I was her personal bodyguard, living with her in Boston. And a few months later, I was elected the imam of the Muslim Mosque, Inc. at age 21. I'm Malcolm's spiritual successor in terms of running the mosque community. Most people don't know that part of my life. And I served for 18 years. But I walked away from being in the mosque after 11 years. After my trip to Mecca in 1974, I realized this was not our religion. This was not an African religion. This is not African culture. And I'm looking for African culture. By this time, I'm a Black nationalist, I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I'm not into Arab culture in that way. And so I left teaching in the mosque, and I finally officially resigned a few years later. It wasn't that easy because people didn't want me to resign because they thought I would be their Malcolm X that would build up Orthodox Islam in America for them. And I go like, that ain't happening. I worked in SNCC. I worked with H. Rap Brown, very close to Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, worked in the Black Panther Party, Zaid Shakur, Lumumba Shakur, Sada Shakur. These were all comrades, you know, Elvis Cleaver, you know, who we call Rage back in the day. So I come from that time period, and I was a participant in that time period. You know, supporting the Black Liberation Army, supporting the International Commandos, the Yehuda fighters, and other things. And then I attended multiple colleges after that, the College of Siskiyou in Northern California, near Oregon, and then City University of New York, where I graduated. During that period, I'm meeting Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Francis Welsing, Shashi McIntyre. So I'm those people's student. I'm their product, you know, as well as that experience in the militant part of the movement. It is then, only then, after all of that, that I become Professor Small, you know, which is the least of my experiences, because most of my experiences was in the streets, taking over buildings, encountering law enforcement. I even had one occasion in LAX where they cleared a terminal and we're laying on the floor with our guns ready and they're coming at us when the FBI interfered and stopped the shootout. And that was 1971. So that part of my life, people don't know about. And so people insist I need to write this biography and kind of let people know how I ended up being a professor working with Leonard Jeffrey, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Hilliard, Dr. Welsing, and others. Well, it's coming out of that part of the movement. And then in the 70s, we realized that we needed to open the university to our young people, but segregation in the North was as bad as far as the university was concerned as it was in the South. So we had to kick the doors in, and we did. We took over campuses after campuses and occupied them. And we ushered in, it was Black students that ushered in open admissions across this nation, not the Board of Eds or governments or anything. It was our efforts. And the rest, in that process, I met a very beautiful lady who I married 51 years ago, and she just went downstairs because I just copied something for her. We have, 8 very beautiful kids, 2 we adopted in Africa, 2 children I had before I got married, and the 4 children that we have together, but they are one family children. And I've just been enjoying teaching my people, fighting for my people. I believed in freedom or death all of my life. I've always studied the Haitian Revolution, studied Nat Turner, the Denmark Vesey. These were my heroes, the Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells. This is what, from my late teens forward, I'm living off of. You know what it feels to live today, and even I only met her twice, but to know I met Assata Shakur. You know what that feels like?
Wow.
You know what that looks like in your brain, right? And to watch her so healthy now, aging. I've aged, I'm 76, she's a few years behind me. But I remember one day, I was her security. I can't give you the circumstances because they may come and arrest me, you know what I'm saying? But I sat with this sister like I'm looking at you, except we were in person, playing cards. And on this occasion, I can tell the story. The police came looking for her, but she was dressed in disguise with an old wig on, or beat up dress. We had a bottle of wine on the table, and we kind of put some on us, so we kind of smelled like wine sitting in the park, you know. And they had her photo and showed it to her. All right.
Wow.
It was the next day that she was moved. I've never seen her again because that was too close for comfort. So to just think of having that moment in history and time with one of our great heroines. Her husband was my best friend, Zahid Shakur. He was the head of the Black Panther chapter in the Bronx. And his brother Lumumba Shakur, the husband of Afeni Shakur, the mother of Tupac Shakur, was over the chapter in Manhattan, in Harlem. So they were my brothers. They were my comrade. Afeni was my sister. I grew up in that world. We grew up together in the movement, you know? So that's where I come from, as well as those people, my grandmother being a root lady and coming from those Moorish scientists and Prince Hall Masons who led our fight in the South. And make no doubts about it, my grandfather was also a preacher at St. Anne's Baptist Church. They were the militants of the day, in their day. You know, they were the ones leading us forward, and we so owe them so much that we don't give them credit for, that they duly deserve. Otherwise, we would not even be having this conversation. We must remember our ancestors. We must respect our elders. I'm going to do a show later tonight with Brother Rich talking about elders. But even if an elder is a drunk sitting on the curb, you are still obligated by African culture to respect that elder as an elder. Now, you may not take advice and follow that elder guidance directly, but be wise now. That very elder who's a drunk outside the street have had experiences that could guide you into the light. So maybe they weren't strong enough to hold up under the psychological and the psycho-spiritual pressure of this society, and it broke them. But that don't make them any less an African consciousness struggling for survival. And so you respect that elder, you know, before you set judgment on them. Because what our people had to suffer was much greater than most of us younger people know. And I call myself younger when I think of Papa and them, you know, and you guys who are younger than I am. Your people suffered something for you. Not just the ones we know, like the Malcolm and Dr. King. Yes, they suffered deliberately up front. But your mother, your auntie, your grandmother, those who had to walk into the world of white racism and terrorism and genocide every day and make a bread for you and take humiliation to make that bread and then come home and kept you safe and gave you sanctuary and food and health and wisdom. Hey, if we don't understand that, we will never have a movement worthy of anything. So me, Brother Small, that's who I am. I'm a father, I'm an uncle, I'm a grandfather, I'm a husband, I'm a brother. When I get up with y'all, the first thing I do is call my sister Fruity because I missed her birthday yesterday. Well, if I want to live, I better make that phone call, you know, and wish her a belated happy birthday. And then we have to take on this false notion of white supremacy, because there's no white supremacy in America. We live in a state, they're talking about violence in America. Like Rap Brown said, violence in America is, how do you say, violence is to America like apple pie. It's what y'all do. You created a terrorist state based on violence and genocide against two people. The African who came recently, the Africans who was here before, and the Asiatics who came across the Bering Straits. I don't call them Native Americans because we were here before them, but they were our comrades, some. All of them weren't comrades. Many warred against the Blacks who were here when they got here. But we had made our peace. And this thing came from Europe and genocided both of us. And talking about going back to a time in America when there was better days. There may have been better days for you, and I doubt that. There certainly was not better days for me. You know what I'm saying? This violence that we're seeing is a part of what America has always been. What you need to do is learn to change and transform through truth of history. Face up to the crimes you've committed, especially against African people. Face up to the crimes you've committed against your own people. And then maybe you can build the promised society that we call America. And what makes it a promised society is our presence. We've made the good that is America. We've made the good. We forced humanity on these people who didn't have a humane bone in their bodies, the way they treated other human beings. And so that's who I am. That's what I come out of. That was my joy. I didn't get to hang out much, so you'll see me listening to a lot of 60s music and 70s music, because I got to constantly go back because I didn't get to do it when I was there, because I was in the movement from the time I'm a teenager. But that was my life, but that was my joy, that was my fun. That's what I loved then, and that's what I love now, fighting for freedom. I can't do it with my body like I used to before, because I'm not that strong anymore, but I can do it with my mind, with my mouth, with my ideas.
Right on.
So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you for that. And thank you for your work. You are a giant that grew amongst giants. And thank you for the work that you have done, that you've dedicated your life to. And we really respect you and want to honor you and really appreciate you, all the work that you've done over the years and all the work that you're continuing to do. So we thank you. We appreciate that. I know that one of my questions for you were who inspired you, but it sounds to me like you draw from so many inspirations and so many heroes and sheroes that there's probably, you could name them all, but there's never just one, because there's so many that that we have to honor.
Well, there are some that I would love to name, and that's my mother.
Oh,
And that's Lucille Susan Johnson, my mom, and my stepfather, Paul Johnson. This man married my mother with 11 children and raised 11 children as his. And he had 2 children with my mom. One died, and then my baby sister, who I'll be calling when I get off the show. And he was the greatest father you could have imagined. If I had to invent a father, I would invent Paul. You know, the nights he stayed up to help me with homework, the guidance he'd give me, he was just an African man. And then my mother, who was just the Rock of Gibraltar in threes. You know, when Dr. Clark would be having guests from the UN and other places at his house, my mother would go over and cook a meal for him. And I would wear a white dinner jacket, like with a cummerbund, so we could serve Dr. Clark and his guests like Dr. Clark deserved. And he loved my mother's leg of lamb that she would make for a lot of this feast that he did. My mother joined the mosque and left the church because she says, if my son's going to be the imam, I'm cooking all of his meals. And that's what she did. I only ate from my mother. My grandparents, my grandmother, I tell you, was a root lady, and my papa, they call him Captain Man because he was a man, Andrew Small. And so those are the first people they're the people that told me we were from Africa. My great-grandfather came from Uganda. My great-grandmother came from Sierra Leone. So we had that in the lineage. And just the way they fought for Black people. You know, me and my brothers and sisters know we got one choice, to go the way they pointed us. And then, of course, meeting Malcolm, you know, Leonard Jeffries, who had been my teacher for over 50 years, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Francis Welsing, Dr. Shashi McIntyre, those great people. And a lady from the Carolinas named Kepa Neftis, Miss Lucille Jones, who ran the First World Alliance and started helped to create ASCAC and set up study groups all over the country and set up lecture series all over the country in the Black community. Those were the people who I wanted to make proud of the work I did. You know, those that. Yeah.
Thank you for that, because I think that's what also that people must remember, like you said, remembering our ancestors on why we're here, but also making them proud of the work that we're doing today, to carry on their legacy, because a big part of it is the people that came before us and our legacy, as well, and that we carry this on to future generations, so that they struggle forward and hopefully persevere, and get us out of this situation that we're in currently.
Well, let me say something. You brought something up, so
Okay.
I'm going to cut in on you, because it's a body knowledge that we have to regain of how Africans saw the world. What is an African worldview? And one of the part of Africa's worldview, no matter where you are on the continent, there's no such thing as death. You are your mother and father, not their offspring, as the white world disconnect. You are them going forward. They were your grandparents going forward, so you are them and your grandparents going forward. They never die as long as you continue to live and you create offsprings. And even if you can't create genetic offsprings, you create psycho-spiritual offspring and alter the genetics to reflect the genetics that made you up. That's African culture. So we are the ancestors that we pour libation to. We are they, literally. And if we understand that, when we pour libation, we'll pour it with a different kind of intent, because as we are pouring it to the experience that we as them created in the past, we pour it to ourselves, who's going to create the new experience in the present. When we understand it like that, there's more power in what we do.
That's very powerful. That's my next question for you. I wanted to better understand how you define African spirituality, and how we are able to carry forth African spirituality.
Well, that's a good question, because that would have been the next thing I would have spoken about anyway. African spirituality is your reality. See, in the Western concept, reality is here, spirituality is there. In the African concept, they're one thing. Your spirituality is your consciousness within you of your reality. You're not doing something separate over here. You're both spirit or energy and matter are both spirits, or spirit and matter are both energies, vibrating at different frequencies, but they're the same energy. See? Africans know that. So that's when you study things like voodoo and Yoruba, and you see these orishas and these loas. What they're trying to describe is the different vibrations that affect different aspects of our lives, and that we can pull upon, call upon, and even grow within ourselves to make us stronger and more powerful persons. They're not gods or goddess we need to back away from that. See, that white folks talk about deities, that's not what we call them. They're forces of nature. It's cosmology and ecology. And we are an aspect of the cosmology and the ecology. I'm looking at you, but all I'm seeing is dirt. And you're like, Brother Smoke, what you talking about? I'm seeing dirt and sunlight. What is that? All those vegetables that you eat got their minerals from the dirt. They turn the dirt into the vegetable once they got impregnated by the light of the sun and the other light energy coming into us. And so we are the universe itself in all of its aspects. And that's what African culture tries to teach us, that we're not separate from God, God over there, we over here. No, we're an aspect of God itself. When man and woman produce children, that's the only way God creates. No babies drop out of the sky, none grow up out of the ground, no, storks fly into your porch and drop a basket. You are that aspect of the divine that creates. What does that make you? The divine, having a human experience. And further, that means you're an aspect of the divine essence, having your peculiar experience, all of which makes up the divine totality itself. That's African culture. And when you view it that way, then spirituality is your reality, except you have to be conscious of that as a fact. And so rituals and beliefs and things simply help you do that work to grow yourself into the universe that you're an aspect of, yet contain the totality of its possibilities.
So
I
for
hope that wasn't
anyone,
too way out there.
no, that wasn't. I loved it. Very powerful. That's what I was looking for. So if anybody, any of our viewers are looking to tap into their truest selves, how would you suggest they do that?
History. Dr. Wade Noble says, history will erase your enemy's mystery from your mind. So study history, erase the mystery, and build your black magic. But if you don't know your history, then you are not energetically connected to the threads that take you back to creation itself. It's history. As simple as it seems, when you know history, it takes away your fears. When you know history, you could talk to Nat Turner. You could talk to Ida B. Wells. They live all around us. Their energy, their vibrations. And I don't mean nothing spooky like white folks' concept of ghosts and all of that. Matter nor energy can be destroyed. So Nat Turner's energy didn't go nowhere. We need to know how to tune into Nat, but you can't do that if you don't know the history that produced Nat. Because he's responding to something to form that energy configuration that made him do what he had to do. Same thing with Harriet. Same thing with your grandparents and great-parents. Know the history of your family. Know who Auntie so-and-so was, who Uncle so-and-so was. Know who Granny was. What part of the country they come from. Was it Mobile, Alabama? And study Mobile, Alabama. Who were the Black people in Mobile, Alabama? What did they go through? What energy did they have to develop? What spiritual forces were they? See? And then what you're going to find is that though Christianity has been a crude crime played against us, the Black church wasn't necessarily Christianity. It's becoming that now, and that's a crime. But it was a sanctuary where they hid Africa for almost 2 centuries. But we can't find Africa in the Black church because we don't know African history so that we can mirror what we see. We see Africa about us all the time, but we don't recognize it. That's why you must study history, because it'll restore your memory of yourself when you were your grandmother. You see?
Thank you.
Y'all got that? I mean, people are looking at them now. Are y'all getting it? I'm trying to give you what those ancestors gave me, you know, because at 76, he was, oh, you look very healthy. But once we hit this kind of age marker, our time ain't never guaranteed, but the guarantees are much less now, you know? And I may not be here with y'all to do this work. Y'all got to do this work, but you got to know the work that you've got to do. Another sister, everyone should begin to read more Zora Neale Hurston. Read that woman. That was a living African soul, spirit in the midst of us, even when Langston Hughes and others were scared of her because she was too Black for them. You know, she says to be there, you got to go there. But to go there, you have got to know there. History is the key to wiping out our enemies' mysteries in our mind so we can work our Black magic as we see fit.
Beautiful. I thank you for that. And personally, in my personal journey, I am tapping into my ancestors and the genealogy, not the genealogy, but the ancestry report of like where we came from, and just tapping into family members on stories they've heard and who we are, to carry that forth for my family. My dad and I have been working together on that, and he's spearheaded it, and it's been really something special. And it just really, once you regain that knowledge, I can see my dad light up all the time about things that he remembers about his grandparents, his great grandparents, and it's just really special to me to carry on that. And it just means so much to know who you are, to carry on where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Knowing thyself over every temple in Kemet that is there. So people say, but I've been there and I've looked for it, I haven't seen it. The symbol, the outstretched wings that you see over every door, with the sun and the two cobras, that's the symbol of knowing thyself. Go ahead, my brother. Thanks for the teaching. And so when we are clear that we are the universe, the pyramid behind you and all of these things we built was to try and map the universe on Earth while partnering with the ecology, the environment that has been given to sustain us. These other crazies came and tried to destroy the ecology, but all they pollute and destroy the water, destroy the earth, not realizing those are your brothers and sisters who are here to make sure you can survive. So your job is to make sure they can survive. You know, that's African culture. Our culture is based on a love of nature, a love of cosmology, on the body knowledge that comes from knowing those two things and what the relationship between ourselves as humans and all of the other living things about us.
Beautiful. Thank you. So that leads into my next question about what's happening. Well, next Sunday is Juneteenth. So could you give me some history on Juneteenth and from the way that you celebrate it, how you feel that it should be celebrated today, and why it's important to be celebrated for what our ancestors endured?
Well, I didn't celebrate it for a long time because I thought people were just celebrating the unique cuteness of the name, Juneteenth. That's a very catchy little phrase right there. Yeah. And a lot of people just hooked on the phrase, knew nothing about the history. And so I'm gonna go detail because my speech is right here. I'm gonna save this for y'all. But I'm gonna give you some overview things. See, when the Emancipation Proclamation was first passed, Black folks started celebrating their Emancipation Day then. They called it Jubilee Day. They had another name. They called it Freedom Day. They called it Emancipation, and it was January 1. And they were celebrating it all around the South. Remember, some of the things about Juneteenth's a myth. People say, oh, the people didn't know for 2 years slavery was over. Of course they knew. Black folks had the best network in the country, okay, in those days. They knew Lincoln had passed the Emancipation Proclamation, but they knew those white folks in Texas was not going to show them any mercy, nor try to tell them the truth. Texas had operated before it joined the Confederacy as though it was a separate nation state of its own. And it continued to, even today, it still have that attitude. Okay, but then it did. And so the 19th of June, which was 2 months after Robert E. Lee surrendered to Grant and the war was over, that's when Granger was sent to Texas to read his order. And I'm gonna see if I can find it. I know I have it here, number 3. Now, he didn't go to Texas to free Black people. See, that's the myth of Juneteenth. We can't play the myth, we gotta play the truth. He did not go to Texas to tell us that the great emancipator Abe Lincoln had set us free. That's not why he went to Texas. He went to Texas to make sure Texas stayed in the Union. All right? So he was sent down there with a military brigade, and that brigade is mostly Black people. And so he went down to Texas to tell those white people, y'all lost the war, y'all get back in the Union. We're not gonna give up this land. This land belongs to the United States of America. And so when Granger gets there with his general order number 3, we have to, and that one I wanna read to you because that tells the whole story. And then we can talk about why we should celebrate Juneteenth, because I think we should celebrate it, but we should celebrate it for the right reason, okay?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna read something that one of my brothers others, Dr. Bernie Gorman wrote. He said, in recognizing and interviews of slave people during that era, the Slave Narrative Project of the Federal Writers Project, which lasted from 1936 to 1938, and it was called the Work Progress, or the WPA, something Roosevelt had started. Africans said they knew about the Emancipation Proclamation from day one. You know, they weren't sitting there ignorant. Maybe the white folks didn't know about it, but Black folks knew about it and were unable to leave because of the slaveholders' weapons. This is what formerly enslaved Africans who was interviewed by this government, these records are in the museums and libraries in Washington. And this can be found in the 17-volume collection entitled Slave Narrative, A Folk History of Slavery in the United States, from interviews from former slaves. Texas interviews are volume 16, and South Carolina interviews are in volume 14, and they can be found in most libraries around the country. So that's why knowing your history will erase the mystery. General Order Number 3 was also intended to advise the formerly enslaved Africans of what freedom meant. So when they took all of those Black soldiers with Granger, they took teachers and people who would help establish freedom schools. And it read in part, this is the order, so you can see it didn't really free us. When you hear it, it actually continued to enslave us. It read in part that they would be absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and that the connection, therefore, existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor.
Wow.
Now, what they've done, let me read the rest and then you see the contradiction, right? It also read that the newly freed Africans were advised to remain quietly at their present home and work for wages. Means stay on the plantation with the same slave owners, and the slave owner gonna decide what he gonna pay you. And we know that shit didn't happen, right?
Right.
I'm sorry for using that word. And then Bernie goes on and said, this insane advice actually recommended that they stay with the people who had enslaved them, tortured them, whipped them, and raped them at worst, and treated them as subhuman pets at best. It also suggests that they not try to find family members, because what a lot of people did when emancipation happened, the first thing Africans did was to leave the plantation now and went look for their children, their wives, or their husbands, their aunties or their uncles, to bring those Black families back together. And millions of them found their families, contrary to the myth of how we were broken up in the way they said, okay? And it also suggests that they not try, and this is also what the order number 3, it also suggests that they not try to find family members who had been sold away or try to find friendlier places. This did not happen. Many of those formerly enslaved Africans left in what was called the scatter. Despite them telling us to stay on the plantation, they go like, look, yo, we know what that was. We getting up out of here, okay?
Right.
You tell me don't go look for my wife? Are you crazy? I'm gonna look for my wife. I'm gonna look for my children. I'm gonna look for my mother. I'm gonna look for my father. So they call that concept the scatter, meaning once Granger read his order, we packed our bag and got the hell up out of there, okay? And started building Black towns, and most of them we were calling Africa Town. And it read further. It said they're informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. They would be arrested and possibly re-enslaved if they were unemployed. This revealed the disrespect that the government of the United States had for these people they claimed they were going to Galveston to free. Now, this is the truth here. I'm trying not to deal with fantasy, right? And the mythology. Let's deal with the truth of what their documents said. And they went further. They said community program that included reading of African-American oral history and storytelling and speeches. They were telling us we couldn't do that. Cookouts and barbecues, goats, and all the things we do to celebrate and stuff like that. They didn't want us to do that, but we were doing it anyway. So here's what we started doing. We started doing cookouts, barbecues, traditional African food, collard greens and potatoes, doing rodeos, parades, and fireworks, park. We started doing all the things to celebrate our freedom because they didn't give us our freedom. See, nearly 500,000 Africans fought in the Civil War. That was our war of liberation. We fought for our freedom. Had we not been pulled into the Civil War, they would have lost to the South because the South was winning the war at the time of the Gettysburg Address. Gettysburg was in Pennsylvania. They were way past the Mason-Dixie line. They were heading for New York. You understand me? And that's when Lincoln says, we got to bring the Black folks in. Now, Blacks had already been fighting in the South, and especially in South Carolina and Mississippi, under General Howard and General Sherman. And the first group was called the South Carolina Black Volunteers, nearly 200,000 people. And then they organized the Massachusetts 54th and brought hundreds of thousands of more in arms, you see. So you got nearly 500,000 Black people carrying guns, fighting the Confederacy. We are spies behind the line. We are sabotaging the crop, burning the fields. We're burning down the plantations. We are helping to do all of the heavy lifting and labor to move the Union Army to where they have to go. Nearly 500,000 of us in that war freed ourselves. Otherwise, America would be whistling Dixie today. So that's why Juneteenth become important to us. Because when we arrive at Juneteenth, 2 years after the emancipation, that was when we closed the deal on slavery and said, this is a wrap, it's over. And we got a right to celebrate it because we helped to make it over. And when Granger came into Texas, most of the troops he brought with him were Blacks, African Americans, to make the point. That was the signature. Okay. So Juneteenth represents for us a moment in history that we should celebrate, a great victory towards our own emancipation. And we don't take anything away from those white soldiers that died because they had to consciously give their lives. They could have ran away. Other whites ran away. The Irish rioted in New York because they didn't want to be drafted into the Civil War, killing hundreds of Black people, burning down orphanages. They rioted in Chicago and St. Louis. They didn't want to fight for us. But many whites, hundreds of thousands, close to 1 million of them died for our freedom. They could have run away. So we can't get caught the way white folks seeing this thing in just black and white, because it wasn't quite like that. It was about human beings having certain kinds of relationship. And those whites weren't just fighting to keep the Union going. People are not that shallow. I was a military person. I carried that gun. And I was a military person in our Black Army. I carried that gun. When you thinking of never coming back home or not making back home that night, there's a lot more going through your mind about why you're doing what you're doing than what the government is telling you, you know? And so the African soldiers that fought in that war, men and women, Harriet Tubman, after having done all the work in the Underground Railroad, then became a reconnaissance intelligence officer for the Union Army, going behind the lines, gathering information, leading Black troops to commit acts of sabotage against the Confederacy. You know, the Black maid that worked for the president of the Confederacy was a spy for the Union Army. Hello, you know the information that system must have passed on? Whose war of liberation? Our war of liberation. And that's why we celebrate Juneteenth. Because we arrived at Juneteenth because of the acts of bravery at Fort Wagner by those Black soldiers in the Massachusetts 54. Because the sacrifice at Fort Pillow when the Confederates slaughtered Black men, women, and children who were unarmed. That's why we celebrate Juneteenth. To remember them, to adore their love for us. A holiday is your holy day, and it is up to you to create what days are holy to you and worthy of remembrance by you. So once I began to understand that, I began to love Juneteenth. As a matter of fact, I'm doing so many speaking of Juneteenth this year. I can barely sit down one day because I want to tell our people, celebrate what your ancestors did. Celebrate those young men and women who died, both Black and whites, but particularly the African ones. Nobody had to make them join. They fought when they didn't have no boots to wear. They fought when the Union Army didn't even pay them money, but they fought because they were fighting for freedom for their people, to end slavery, to end genocide, because slavery was genocide. It was not a work program. It was genocide, crime against humanity, committed against the people that had committed no crime against anyone. And that's why we celebrate them. And Juneteenth is a moment to celebrate them.
I love that. And I would like to also mention that it's not quiet as it's kept, but we've been resisting and fighting ever since our arrival. And though we were here, but we've resisted throughout our enslavement to
absolutely
free ourselves, definitely.
Our ancestors are so worthy. I mean, and those Africans who were already here, we married into them. We are them. They're not a separate group over here. And the ones who came in the slaves that were separate. We amalgamated a couple of centuries ago. You can start reading about some of that in LaRon Bennett's book, The Shaping of Black America, the chapter on the Black and the Red. Study the history of the Seminole. The Seminole come from a Spanish word, cimarron, which means runaway. It had nothing to do with any native Asiatic Americans. Okay, we did marry into the Red Creek Nation. The Greater Creek Nation sided with white folks and hunted us down like dogs, but the Red Creeks sided with us. We are the ones that was in the Trail of Tears, not some light-skinned Asiatic persons. A few of them were there, but the majority was us. We were settled into the Indian Territory. What was Indian Territory? Oklahoma. It is the same runaway Seminole that builds Black Wall Street. That's why history erases the mystery. You know your history, you just like, damn, my people was bad. We come from greatness unimaginable. You know? And when we love them, we love the best of them in us, because we are them. Moving forward to time. When they gave birth to their children, they gave birth to themselves. That's African way of looking at the world. And it is a correct way. Nobody can scientifically refute that.
Great.
Wow.
That's beautiful. That's
That is
beautiful.
beautiful. I'm in awe.
So we have about 4 minutes left in the program,
Okay.
Baba. So
Yes.
I don't know whether any of the other members have any questions. If not, if you want to go ahead and just close us out. I know you have other engagements that you need to get to. So.
I'm gonna be on Brother Rich at 8 o'clock. I know y'all know Brother Rich. Black Magic.
Oh yeah. Well, they probably may not know Rich, but yeah, I follow.
I have a
Brother
question for the brother.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, thank you. I think it was a very, very powerful presentation, and I'm glad Malik arranged this to take place. I'm not sure whether you know it or not. We're only probably less than a half an hour from the Antietam battlefields, which were some of the major battles during the war. Yeah.
Yes.
And also Gettysburg. We're about a half an hour from Gettysburg.
Wow.
Yeah.
Y'all in the midst of a lot of spirits down there.
Yes. A
lot of energy.
I got some stories I can tell you about that energy and all, but I want to ask my question first.
Yes, sir.
As you interacted with some of the giants of our movement, you mentioned Sister Malcolm's sister, I forget her name now.
Ella.
Sister Ella, who was very instrumental in his development. I enjoyed reading and learning about the sister. But as you were work with Dr. Ben and Dr. Jeffries, is there an underlying thread that all of these giants wanted to sure that our people were aware of or knowledgeable of?
Yes, sir. I think the one thing that all of them taught me was the love for knowing our history, because it is that love that teaches us to love our people without any qualification, that you don't qualify why you love your race. That is essential as breathing. And I saw the sacrifice that Dr. Clark made and Dr. Ben made to go and teach somewhere where people paid them little or no money. They couldn't really have big jobs in the system because they were fighting against the system. And our people didn't understand that. If you fight the system, they do not reward you. It is up to us to reward and take care of them. We didn't do it well for many of them.
Yes.
You know, John Jackson, who was another one of my teachers, Chancellor Williams, to Dr. Jeffries, that brought them all to Teachers College, to just have been in a lecture with those men once. The one thing you get was, we love our race. We do this for the love and the salvation of the race, not for ourselves. That was what was the thread that ran through all of them, right down to Sister Frances. I met Sister Frances Welsing when she was a young lady with an afro at a Black Power conference in 1967 in Newark, New Jersey. And she was telling the brothers then, y'all shouldn't be sitting around here on your what? You need to get out here, go to that jail, break in and take a man with Barack out of that jail. Back then, you know? And so the one thing that was clear with all of them was the love for race, the love for freedom, the love for the unification of African people as a one African people. That this dialogue we're having, it is all right to understand our diversity, because we are a diverse people. We have the greatest diversity of any people on the planet Earth. But we should not use our diversity to create division in the body people. And so many people, unfortunately, are doing that. Yes, I'm an African American. Africa is my race, my culture, my lineage, my beginning. America is my geopolitical place. I pay taxes here. I work here. I have to learn to control the institutions in the community I live in. If I'm going to control my life, I've got to control as a people the economic, politics, and culture where I live. And that means I must get in charge of the land, labor, and resources where I live. To do that, I must understand how the system works and then use it to my advantage.
Yes. Yes.
That's great. That's beautiful. Once again, Baba, I mean, it's been a pleasure. I've watched you with, in other interviews, I've always been amazed of the wisdom that you have. And I'm sure that working with giants like Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben, Dr. Jackson, Chancellor Williams, I'm sure that they have given you a lot or shared a lot of wealth of information with you. But being able to sit here and have this conversation with you this evening, it's been a blessing. And I'm looking forward to actually having that conversation with you on Saturday.
Yeah, there's one thing to always remember, and I try never to forget. We're all broken. We all have shattered aspects to ourselves. We're all trying to heal and grow ourselves, rebirth our African essence. Even me. I have to always go and clean out the cabinet that's full of the garbage of whiteness out of my mind on a daily basis, constantly. And sometimes you forget. You think you out here teaching so much, you forget. You have to clean you up too.
Right.
You have to constantly repair you, fix you. And then you will begin to truly feel the ancestors.
Yes. Yes. Do anyone else have anything before we close? He has to get to another show, so I don't want to keep him long.
I just wanted to be, before Jared goes, I just wanted to say thank you. And this is life-changing for me to be able to speak to a giant like yourself. And again, your wealth of knowledge, and I look forward to meeting you on Saturday, and I'm thankful for this experience.
Yes.
Yeah, my dear. Remember,
Yes,
you
yes.
guys and ladies, you are the future not just of the race. You're the future of God itself. You see, our culture is a culture of the nature and essence of Godness itself. That's what the others are trying to dethrone, destabilize. And there will be no harmony in the world until we return to our African essence on the real. Then the harmony will be restored.
Great. Yeah.
Professor Small, could I say something
Yes,
real
sir.
quick? I noticed in your beginning
sir.
of your presentation, you said that you enjoy the music, listening back at the old music of the days.
Yes, sir.
But you know, that's what attracted me. I can remember my mother kicking me out the door, telling me to go sell some Black Panther newspapers. But it was the music that I think defined and was the big difference. You know, those musicians knew what their responsibilities were, and I miss that now.
I missed it because that music spoke to the political condition, the political struggle, the economic condition, the family condition. And the beautiful thing about the music at that time was the adoration that the female singers showed for the male.
Yes.
The adoration that the male singers showed for the female in our community.
Yeah.
And we learned that.
Yes.
Mary Wells talking about my God. Oh, please. How can you not understand what that means? I got two lovers, you know, and they're both the same, you know. They were telling our story. They were doing social commentary on the positive.
What's going on?
The kids today, what's going on? What's happening today? They're doing social commentary, but they're only focusing on the negative. We do have negativity in the community. We do have crimes in the community. But if that's the only place you're focusing on, the 10% that dropped out of high school or the 20% that dropped out of high school, and you missed the 85 and 90% that completed high school, that you talk about the people who the enemy have forced to keep in a ghetto position, but you miss the Black working class and middle class was the overwhelming majority of the Black community. They're not committing crimes. They're not selling drugs. They're not going to prison. They're having beautiful families, and we're not telling their stories anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And that old music, I just get James Brown just take me for a trip. Jackie Wilson, when Jackie screamed, "You better stop dogging me around," he having a conversation with his lady. Well, I'm gonna put you down. So, and then you start realizing that I can have that same conversation, you know, and because the social music should be, as a cultural tool, a purveyor of social consciousness through social commentary, you know. But what has happened, the enemy has taken control over so many aspects, and we're getting satisfied just for getting paid and not saying, yes, I want to get paid, but I want what I do to have a quality that would come back as a positive note to my community. That don't mean you leave out the bad. We need to talk about the bad too, you know. But you've got to talk about the good. We have an immense good. Multiple Black schools, Black Boys Academy is sending 100% of their kids to college every year. They've been doing it for decades, and nobody have a conversation about that.
Right. Right.
You know? Our women, I just left a conference in Columbia, South Carolina, about the achievements of Black women. I know because I do a piece up here with my group, the Gathering of Men in New Rochelle. We call it Phenomenal Black Women. And each year we give three awards for 3 phenomenal Black women. And then I do a slide piece with the history of phenomenal Black women. Down there, they've taken it to a whole nother level. Because, oh my God, the world don't know what we've achieved. Just in the last 50 years, they don't know what our women have done to create an environment to educate our young in these university systems throughout the country, especially in the South. They don't know what they've done in medicine and law. And see, those are the balm that grow the next generation, having that body of knowledge to chew on. Whether it's in music or in lecture or in documentaries or in films, that's what we got to do. You know, I consult on a film called The Godfather of Harlem. Right?
Yeah.
And
Bumpy Johnson.
yeah, and we killed more white people in the Godfather of Harlem than was killed in the Civil War. So I hate to laugh because it's a movie. But the point we wanted to make, Forrest Whitaker and the others, was like, we're not going to have a defeated Black person in this movie.
Right.
We're going to go up against the best you got, but we're going to come out as a victorious Black person. That's the model. So,
That's great. I need to watch that series.
check it out. Some people say it's too violent. My wife don't watch it. She said, James, it's too violent. And
I'm
some
glad
other
that you
people
brought.
comment says it is, but you got to get the nuances. This Black gangster isn't running around with prostituting his sisters and selling dope and shooting people. He comes home to a family and he sits at the table and have dinner with his wife and children. So this is a different kind of look, which is more realistic than what they've given us in other movies.
Right.
He's involved. He joins the Masonic Lodge, right? He's involved in putting his money in the Black bank. He's stating clearly the Black community should be run by Black people. And then his partner is Malcolm X throughout the piece. Bumpy Johnson, Malcolm X. The subtitle is When the Harlem Underground Meets the Civil Rights Movement.
Mm.
And his other partner is Adam Clayton Powell Jr. I don't think we presented Adam with the strength I wanted them to be presented. And we just had that argument a few weeks ago, and they said they're going to try to make it even better. Giancarlo keeps running me, Esposito running away, and don't give me enough time with him. But this year, I'm going to jack him up and put him in a corner and told him, like, you're going to have to, like I told Chris the other day, take the liquor glass out of Adam's hand. Every scene, you don't have to have Brother Powell drinking or smoking a cigarette, because he didn't do that. Yeah, he drank, he had a good time and stuff like all of us did, but I was one of his bodyguards for a period of time. And I know that wasn't him.
Mm.
That representation matters and the way that we see
Absolutely.
ourselves.
So we did make another piece to expose Adam in a way that the movie missed. And it's called By Whatever Means Necessary. It's a documentary. And I'm in there with the love of my life, Gladys Knight, Martha from Martha and the Vandellas, brother, walking in the street, Dr. Herb Boyd, Forrest Whitaker, and we tell the story of Adam Clayton Powell in the culture of Harlem. So it's called By Whatever Means Necessary. Get a chance to look it up. It's on MGM Epic. You should be able to find it.
Okay, great.
I think that Jared had a question. I wanted to give him.
No,
I do have an 8 o'clock.
Oh, yes.
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say
okay.
thank you for your time, your knowledge, and most importantly, your guidance and how we can, become more knowledgeable of our history, ourselves, and how we can be able to, move forward in the fight. So I just want to say thank you for, being that giant, like everybody else said, and casting that shadow of knowledge like you have been and will do moving forward. So just thank you.
Well, thank you guys for picking up the scepter, because that's what we live for, Bubba. We could tell them that we live so that when we fall, that flag don't hit the ground. That red, black, and green, you grab it. That scepter don't fall. That scepter of spirituality and knowledge, you catch it.
Great.
Carry it till your day is done.
Great. So we held your hostage long enough, Baba.
Well, that time went by so fast.
Yeah, it did. So what are you talking about on Rich's show tonight?
Relationship between elders and the community.
Okay.
Would you say, Keela?
Sir?
You on mute?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. So I again appreciate you taking this time with us, and we'll see you on Saturday where we can continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Tell Rich don't be mad with us.
No, he won't. Okay. Peace and blessings now. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings to you.
Uhuru, brother.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was awesome. Thanks, y'all.
You stopped the recording.
Oh,
No, we're still recording.
Oh, we're still recording.
Yeah, you clicked off.
Okay.
click back on. Okay.
Good job,
All right.
Akila.
All right, so we just stopped. So I need
Still,
to
still live on YouTube.
Oh yeah, we're on YouTube.
yeah, it'll end. I mean,
Oh,
it's
okay.
always, it's going to be a delay. It's always a delay.
Oh, gotcha.
Wait a minute.
Kat, are
hold
you
on.
back on?
No, it's